This thing on, right. Right after that amazing performance, I'm going to bore you all by talking about one of my projects for 15 minutes straight. Thanks to Leeza and also the Asian Cultural Council for inviting me here. Right, so this is really just a deep dive into one of my projects. I think we can see a sort of superficial similarity there. And where it really came from was, firstly, that I was probably about 15 when I first saw a full field of stars in the sky, them being basically invisible in Singapore and other urban areas. And to really wind it back, well, William Gibson's Neuromancer opens with the line, "The sky above the port was the color of television tuned to a dead channel," by which he recalled the sodium, silvery, and almost painful color and texture of a signal-free television in his childhood. If this is the best image I could find of a 50s television, if someone remembers what it was like and wants to correct me, please do. However, his readers, in the first years of its publication, would likely imagine the stark mottled gray of static. Then with the death of analog television, the reference shifts again, and it could be something like a blue so intense that it could never possibly exist in the sky, or maybe a giant DVD logo bouncing around the horizon. And we can read of the discrepancy and then adjust in our mind's eye what we see when we think of that phrase, sky the color of television tuned to a dead channel. But that reflex image is always going to be that first type of dead channel that you think of. And our galaxy is passed on in much the same way for those of us who live in urban areas. My experience of the Milky Way in particular has only been by way of various representations. It's not something I've ever personally seen. And a full third of humanity lives in places where it's invisible. I suppose that's an experience that's common to billions of people. That the phrase "the night sky" evokes a dark expanse, pocked here and there by isolated stars. One popular legend, in the vein of the supposed 1938 War of the Worlds radio broadcast panic, has it that in the wake of a '94 blackout caused by an earthquake in LA, residents called the police or the observatories, the stories vary, to express confusion or alarm at the sight of this strange silvery cloud in the sky. Similarly to city-dwelling humans, the constellations are... Oh, I was supposed to show this picture earlier from Madagascar. To city-dwelling humans, the constellations are no longer recognizable figures whose annual procession forms such a striking contrast to the vagaries of life on Earth, but rather abstract, barely glimpsed entities, more familiar through astrology apps and the tumblers of enthusiastic neo-pagans. In Maori myth, the galaxy is the canoe of Tamarareti which made the stars. Practitioners of the Chinese folk religion, however, think that same canoe is in fact a silver river, which parts a pair of lovers who are only permitted to meet during the annual Chusi festival, aided by a great bridge of birds. Every constellation is some god, monster, hero, figure, or object of mythic significance, or even symbols of more abstract concepts. The very elements of myth and narrative which humankind has tried to make sense of the world, and all far more distant in cultural memory than Gibson's dead channel sky. Does anyone recognize any constellations there? Probably not. That's a trick question. I'll come back to that in a minute. What my project asks is, while we have long projected meaning onto the stars, seeking correspondence between microcosm and macrocosm, and whereas we city dwellers are now unable to see the stars, could the search for meaning have been transmitted from the old lights to the new? What meaning can be found in the symbols we project onto artificial lights? So how it works is that the project involves randomly generating patterns of light from taking artificial urban lighting as a source and then basically turning it into randomly animated artificial star field. Now, the symbols and stories that they evoke did not simply disappear all at once. The timeline isn't as simple as first there was no light pollution and we commune with nature, and then there was light pollution, and then the human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria. They receded in gradual lockstep with the uneven distribution of technological advancement. And with each step, our relationship between the old lights and new changed. If we go back to the moment when artificial light first began to supplant the stars, when Paris first gained the epithets City of Light, the thousands of gas lamps led to such enthusiastic proclamations as, "That which most enchants the Parisians is the new lighting by gas of the boulevards, shining with a clarity pure and white." And then there's a similarly utopian sentiment I found in a 1911 poster that I couldn't find a good image for. It reads, "The triumph of gas lights, and it shall soon come to pass that Windsor's patent gas light will soon eclipse the moon, and when that's done, put out the sun." Not everyone was a fan of the new gas lamps, of course. They also saw opposition with an article in the Kölnische Zeitung of 28 March 1819, objecting on several grounds. This is not the actual paper, but I thought it was nice to have a picture that corresponded with it. They objected on theological grounds, as a rebellion against the order of day and night ordained in creation. They objected on economic grounds, as you would have to pay tax to pay for these new lights, even if you didn't want them. They objected on medical grounds, as gas vapors cause illness in the frail and lingering about in the cold night causes coughs. And they objected on philosophical moral grounds. Fear of the dark tempers our impulse to sin, so the thought goes. With street lighting, the drinker drinks into the night, and unmarried lovers get up to all kinds of things. They blame street lighting for that. Some of these objections, interestingly, contradict the most commonly held benefits of street lamps, that it's thought to reduce crime, and both through the practical element of increasing visibility, as well as somehow transmitting morality directly into your brain, like some kind of thing. And then just a few decades later, as electric light started to supplant gaslight, the quality of gaslight, the color, the texture, and all that, began to take on a less salubrious overtones, a flickering, lurid liminality, congenial to all manner of danger and excess described in popular fiction of the day, and lately reincarnated as gaslamp fantasy. And then with the rise of what they call moonlight towers, giant electric arc lamps, there was even speculation that electric lighting could obviate the need for law enforcement entirely, which you used to call them policemen on poles, with such sentiments as the brighter the light, the better for truth, purity and honor, and the worse for fraud and all this fearful spawn of evil which flourishes in the darkness. In the present day, we now have the benefit of some hindsight, and we realize that tearing down the stars isn't all that great. It's still in this picture. Hence, we see the rise of dark sky movements in recent times. My project has less to do with the practical concerns of light pollution interfering with astronomy and circadian rhythms and all that, and more to do with how the ascent of artificial light could play into our relentless search for meaning, and how it hasn't automatically inaugurated an age of perfect, unambiguous morality, frozen in an all-encompassing sphere of light with all mysteries and fantasies extinguished. In the absence of the stars, I propose that our minds turn their formidable capacity for projection elsewhere. As to the extent of that capacity, we need only look for faces in the clouds, or toast, or consider the case of Chonosuke Okamura, a paleontologist who specialized in fossils of invertebrate and algal specimens from the Ordovician period to the Tertiary period. He seems to have snapped one day, and then began seeing in these mineral grains and other minute features of slabs of polished limestone all manner of modern creatures, humans included. Of humanity, he claims, there have been no changes in the bodies of mankind since the Silurian period, except for a growth in stature from 3.5 millimeters to 1,700 millimeters. with similar claims for all extant creatures. To describe this tiny, ancient, yet complete mirror of the modern species, he would append each species with the suffix mini orientalis, like Homo sapiens mini orientalis, Felis catus mini orientalis, and so on. He even claimed to have discerned evidence of culture in these minute figures, describing such behavior as the presence of a work ethic, crafting art, having social nobility, theological beliefs, hairdressing, dancing. Perhaps he's so tired of a universe whose remaining secrets seem to amount to simple bookkeeping that he populated these slabs with entire worlds, all the ways of life of its inhabitants, their fears and dreams. What more could we do with our colossal systems of lights? I favor myself to think that my project, consider open bracket, close bracket, semicolon, Cadastre per Aspera, is at least a little pataphysical, at least in part through its sesquipedalian title. It usually ends up getting shortened to the Consider series or the Cadastre series. In full, though, with some etymological hand-waving, the sentiment meant is something along the lines of to regard the stars of city X through effort and exact measurement of property boundaries. Why property boundaries? Well, with the punny corruption of the motto ad astra per aspera, baser concerns like having more land than the other guy seem like the perfect opposite of the stars we turned our backs on. Perhaps I find it particularly resonant coming from a society so calculating that it's not uncommon for young men to propose to their girlfriends by saying, "Darling, do you want to apply for public housing?" In the course of my research, though, I did find that this sort of sentiment is actually ancient. Things like marriage alliances that we see on Game of Thrones. And actually, if you go back to the long-dead Sumerian language, their word for love is a compound verb that, if you break it down, translates to measure the land. However, this is not a narrative of loss. Just as entropy always increases in a closed system, strangeness tends to increase in human civilization. This project explores but a fraction of that tendency and hopefully adds to the strangeness of the world. It's not even as simple as a natural, artificial distinction. The stars may be eternal and proof from any human meddling, for now, but any of us is free to invent stories about them and share those stories with each other. Entire systems of folk religions and amateur astrologies. Artificial lights, on the other hand, may have been made by us, but in a very broad, general sense, a level of us that is so far beyond the individual that they may as well have been made by something else. Yeah, I think that's me done.